Hey family, Joseph Baba Ifa here. Thank you so much for tuning into Our Roots podcast, where only the strongest roots see the light, brought to you by Botanica Candles and more. And if you haven't had the opportunity, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and be sure to share this video. Today's episode is Ifa with elders, mentors, and guides. And our guest today is one that we've seen before and one we're going to see many times more. A priestess of Oshun of over 10 years, someone with multiple godchildren, Miss Erica Oshun Poroye. Welcome back, Poroye.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be back.
Thank you so much for coming back. With Ifa now, we're seeing such a surge, an influx of people who are trying to get initiated and become a part of this spirituality. The big question is, who do I move forward with? And that's what we really wanted to provide clarity on today. Because a lot of people say, what should I look for? What should I avoid? What to be careful with? What are the signs? What do I expect? And those are all the things we wanted to touch on, right? So the first thing we want to go ahead and define is, what is a godparent? And before I get into some of the characteristics that I've been able to identify, Poroye, I wanted to give you the opportunity of what a godparent is to you.
Well, a godparent, in my opinion, from my experience and the way that I see it and interpret it, is a godparent is a lot of things, but most importantly, it's a mentor. It's somebody who's going to mentor you through your journey. And, you know, as a mentor, it's important to identify what it is you're trying to accomplish and where that elder is going to fall into that. An elder is, you know, someone who is going to be attached to you forever. More than a friend, more like a family, and more like a parental elder type of relationship. Someone who is going to hold your hand through your journey and empower you to be able to accomplish the things that you are looking to accomplish within this beautiful culture.
Wonderful response. Now, from a literal initiatory standpoint, who can we define as a godparent? From an Ifa standpoint, it's either the gentleman who gives you the hand of Ifa, or for those eligible for said priesthood, the person that converts you into a babalawo by way of initiation. In an Orisha context, who are your godparents? Your godparents are whoever initiate you into Orisha priesthood or provide you a deity, or the Ojugbona, or second godparent from either of these initiations, right? Anything outside of this context technically is not your godparent. So knowing all the steps in preparation that it takes to be able to initiate someone and bring them into our spirituality, it is the hugest responsibility. Not just getting them there, but all that comes afterwards, such as teaching, tutelage, molding, all of the things that go into making a spiritual professional and being within our spirituality. So, Poroye, I ask you, how much of a responsibility is it to you for you to actually take somebody on and say, I'm your godparent, you are my godchild?
That's a great question because, you know, one of the things we always talk about is the fact that you, Joseph, you initiate a lot of people through their hand of Ifa, which is the first step within this belief system. And we get the question a lot because being that we're a couple, we work together as a team, we get a lot of people saying, hey, are you my madrina now? And my answer to them is, you know, no, I'm not. You know, I'm symbolically, yes, I'm the apeteri of the house. I help you through that initiation and help them through that process. But I really take that title, madrina, godmother, very seriously. And I like to set that tone early on, you know, when I get this question asked to me, you know, because I always tell people, you know, I need to get to know you and you need to get to know me, because this relationship that we're going to build, it's for a lifetime and it's very serious. It's not just a title for me. It's not just a name. I want everyone to understand how important this role is and this title is of godparent. And that's why early on, I like to make sure that we make that very clear.
Awesome. And selection is really important because the Odu Irete Kutang says our godparent in this life was the one we had in the past life and the one we'll have in the next. So until we get it right, we're going to keep interacting until we take each other to that higher state of spiritual being and elevation so that we can earn the right to not have to reincarnate, right? But why is it so important? Apart from being the only one you'll ever have, it's very important that you base who you choose on your goals, right? Now, every house focuses on different things. You have houses that are very Ifa centric, you have houses that are very Orisha centric, and unfortunately, sometimes you even have houses that aren't really centric on anything other than kind of fraternizing, right? Which is legitimate in the sense of how they may want to manifest it. But some people have goals. Some people have aspirations. Rather than, hey, we get together every time there's a drumming and we hang out, some people are like, I really want to actually learn. I want to possibly have my own house one day. I want to learn this skill and craft to be able to help others. And that's huge because you want to make sure that you're not falling into the wrong one, whatever your goals are. And we see a lot of that now, Poroye, where some people end up in a house because they don't necessarily know what they want yet. And it's very important to identify who you are, what it is that you desire, so that we can avoid a separation. Because some people who are trying to fraternize end up in a very serious priest professional house, and they quickly see, hey, I'm not compatible with this because I'm not trying to sacrifice or put in that work to become that. Or you have very serious people who unknowingly end up in a house that's a little more informal, and they easily become frustrated because they're ambitious and they want to learn things. So how important do you feel is it for people to get, like you just said, it's important to get to know each other and make sure you make that right selection? Where have you seen that go wrong for people sometimes?
Well, first, I mean, I would start by saying, or just, explaining how I go about it. And how I find it to be the most productive, just in my opinion. Everyone has the right within their own spiritual house to implement the strategies that they feel appropriate. But, based on my experience and my logic, I think the first step is to identify what is the person's goals. So if I have a person come to me and they say, hey, I want you to be my godmother, I first want to understand what they think that means, to see where they're at. And then I want to identify, well, what is your goal? Why do you want to be initiated? What do you want to see happen? Where do you see yourself within the next 5 years, so that I could be able to identify how I'm going to help this person. Not everyone is the same. Every person has to be treated as an individual. Everybody's going to have a different goal within this. And everybody's going to have a different expectation. So it's very important, as an elder, that we identify that from day one. And then also we're identifying if we're going to be first and foremost spiritually compatible. And this is why, Joseph, we always go by that criteria. You need to receive your hand of Ifa, because how can you move forward within this belief system if you don't know who you are yet, right? Because Orumila is going to identify who we are through your life sign, which is your Odu. And once you have that, that's like your spiritual DNA. So, what I do as an elder within our household is I identify through that sign if this person is going to be compatible with myself through my sign. And then once we identify if that is going to be a good fit or not, then, do we even like each other's personality? Can we sit down and, can I teach you? Are you teachable? Are you coachable? Are you patient? That is the most important thing. These are all things that I look for, and I identify early on when I'm considering bringing in someone or initiating someone within this belief system. I think that, and I'm gonna go off a little bit on this because the question you asked me was so broad.
Correct.
I think that once again, this is my opinion, but I think there might be a little bit of a confusion sometimes that we find a lot of people saying, well, what do I look for in a godparent? And sometimes they don't even know what a godparent is, right? Because you're just coming into this. You're like a baby, you're a newborn. You're not supposed to know. That's what we're here for. That's our responsibility, is to teach and educate. And I think that sometimes elders out there might be giving the wrong impression by, just using the title very loosely. Hey, this is my goddaughter, this is my godson, everybody's an hijado, everybody's an hijada. But the reality is, are they really? And are you really assimilating that role as an elder? And are you educating them how to assimilate the role as a godchild? That's the question.
Well, that's why I wanted to start this interaction by defining what an elder actually is, because it does get thrown around so loosely. And whatever people's motivations behind that is, we can only, speculate. But the actual definitions are the ones that we explained at the beginning. Because to be an elder, when you look at the concept of elder, where does it come from? It comes from our parents, right? By way of birth, by way of the sacrifice that they put in to be able to raise us, etc. And that's the same thing that happens when you initiate someone into this spirituality by way of priesthood or a deity. You're birthing them within that context. So that's when it's official. Not, the random reading, not we hung out twice and, I'm initiated and you're not, so I son you. None of that. So there has to be an actual due process, right? So that's why we clarified that from the beginning. A couple other categories that come up or titles that come up, right? Because one of the biggest issues I've ever had in my practice is that sometimes the people that actually do initiate never wanted to initiate or never really had the desire or need to initiate. They were somewhat misguided, where it's like, hey, you have this problem. You went for a reading and the person said you need to receive this or initiate into this priesthood to be able to save your life, right? When in reality, initiations, as miraculous as they are, they save lives the same way an atomic bomb could kill an ant. It's overkill sometimes, and what really saves lives in this practice and spirituality is ebo. Whether it's an ebo by way of your sign of Ifa on the tray of Ifa, or an offering, sacrifice. Some people could just get through life like that. Like I have clients now, I'm going on 7 years of Ifa initiation now. I have clients that I've been attending to since I got initiated and got my license, and they've invested enough money to get initiated many times over, but it's just not their thing. They're not going to take care of Orula. They're not interested in living this lifestyle. They want the benefits on a client basis, and they just want to move forward with their lives. And that has to be respected and taken into account, because if not, where does Orula and the Orishas end up? The garbage or the garage, and that's what we really want to avoid. And that's segueing us into this next topic. Are you a client? Are you an hijado? Or are you both, right? What is defined as a client? A client is someone that wants to come, get consulted, receive their services, and go about their lives. That is a client. You're an hijado. What does that mean? You want to get initiated and you want to be involved in this spirituality in a more formal context. Or are you both? Because, as you know, you have people that get initiated and they choose not to learn, which is perfectly fine, especially when we're talking about Orisha. When someone becomes babalawo, or they even penetrate into the priesthood of Oriate or Abore Orisha, it's not that simple. You do have to learn obligatory if you want to hold these roles. You have to study daily. It's a sacrifice. But let's say somebody wants to get initiated into Orisha as a priest of Orisha. You have all the rights to attend to your Orishas, clean them, worship them, and not offer practice for anyone else. But the thing is, though, is whether you want to learn or not, you still have to learn a little bit, or the ABCs as we like to call it, to be able to fulfill your obligations with Orisha. Because what comes with Orisha priesthood, right? We have the famous birthday, right? Where offerings have to be made to Ori. We have to make offerings to the Orishas. And if you don't know how to do that, who are we expecting to do it? Our godparents, right? Or said professional. But this is where the confusion comes in, or possibly the frustration, because just because you've been initiated as an ahijado doesn't mean now you get a preferred rate or things are free, because your elders, they still have a life. They have needs, they have obligations, and, they have to be compensated for their time just like before you got initiated. Let's say you go to a doctor or a physician. Let's say you've been attending yourself with this person for, I don't know, 10 years. The copay doesn't go down in any way. So it's the same thing here. So I guess my next question for you, Poroye, is why do some people seem to be very frustrated with compensating their godparents for the work that they're doing after initiation?
I think once again, what we're looking at here is possibly a miscommunication or lack thereof communication. And that just goes back into what we were talking about, how we want to identify what is the reason. Because Ifa and Orisha is so much more than a religion. It's a culture and it's a lifestyle. And so when we say something like, I want to initiate, it's really important for us to understand what is the reasoning behind that. And through that reasoning, we're going to really understand where somebody's mind or expectation might be. For example, I want to initiate an Oshun. Let's say someone comes to me. Okay, well, why do you want to initiate an Oshun? For example, we can get a response such as protection. I want to have protection. Okay, well, there's a lot of ways that we can have protections within this that doesn't require you to initiate an Oshun. And then you're going to have spiritual households that will tell you if you're a child of Oshun, you automatically have the crown, which is definitely not a criteria that we necessarily follow, within our household. I don't think that we need to generalize that someone needs to initiate into anything, because we don't know if that person was already initiated in another life, or if that's their path, if that's their goals, and if that's what they're going to do. All those things have to line up. And so the point is, once we're identifying, then you really get to understand where everyone's mind is at. And there's no right or wrong answer, right? It's just about us understanding each other. Because if I'm initiating someone, I need them to understand that even if you tell me you are initiating for your own well-being, rather than being able to help others or have a botanica one day or have your own godchildren, it's important to understand you're always going to have to learn to an extent. You have to study. And you have to study because what you have forever. You can't get rid of that. You have Oshun, you have her forever, and everything that comes with that. And the individual has to know how to take care of their things. And as an elder, it's our job to empower the Godchild by teaching them how it is that they're going to utilize all these things for their benefit, and also how they're going to pay homage and how they're going to essentially take care of their own things, right? So going into your question, Joseph, I think that, the misconception is from the beginning, because if we're not explaining and having those conversations, then, you just go ahead and did Santo. You didn't learn anything. You're 3 years old now in Santo, and you don't know how to throw cocos to your own orishas. As your godparent, it is not my job to do that. It is my job to empower you and teach you how to do it, because those are your orishas. And what happens is, if you choose not to learn those things and you want to take my time away from possibly other godchildren, away from my business, away from my children, my husband, and my family, well, there's debts that come with that. And that is why, the expectation is there is going to be a fee there, because we are not living in an age where we could trade, sugar for rice. We are living in a different age right now where there's bills and there's the reality of the life and the age that we live in right now. And if I need to take the time, and if you chose not to learn these things, then you also have to choose to understand that there's going to be a payment that comes with that. So I think it's just being able to deliver that information and setting those expectations early on so that it's understood.
Awesome response. And one thing about us is every time someone comes to initiate into Orisha with us or as Babalawo, I think we're some of the most honest and frank people anyone could initiate with. Why is this? Because when they come, we tell them all these things up front. And one thing I do to motivate our guys is that I say, hey, if you get initiated as a priest, and you have this license and you're still coming to me after an extended amount of time where you should have learned the things you're asking me for by now, I'm going to charge you more than I would the regular client. And I tell them this and I show them the comparable. Why is because I need motivation. Because it's like you said, if and at the end of the day, there is compensation involved, but it's not about money at this point because one word that you used was empowerment. If I'm trying to empower you, I don't need slaves. I don't need preferred clients, which is what an ihalo that is a client still becomes. I need professionals. And, a lot of people, before you actually have that conversation with them, they're like, yeah, I want to be a professional. I want to have clients. I want to have godchildren. I want to have all these things. When you actually put not the pressure, but the expectation upon them is when it's easily seen whether they're contrite about it or whether they'd rather go in another direction. But it's one thing that we incorporate and we've gotten great results with it. But like with every organization and with every situation, not everybody is able to answer the call, and that's okay. But the most important thing is that the honesty is there, because it's like you said, if we're honest from the beginning, everybody can be held accountable as such and everybody can move forward accordingly without frustration or without resentment. But what is a godparent supposed to do apart from empower? Confirmation, right? Hey, Padrino, I'm going through this situation, haven't experienced it yet. How would you move and maneuver it? What would be your response? What do you think my response should be? That's a huge part of the value that comes with the cost of initiation, because I've always said tuition is included in admission, right? If I've allowed you and brought you into this organization, it's so that I can edify you and make you a good representative of said house. So to be able to do that, I have to provide those confirmations to avoid you making more mistakes than you need to, or that those mistakes aren't of a high magnitude. What's the other thing that we have to provide? Knowledge. We have to provide tutelage. When guys do Ifa with us, or when people do Orisha with us, the first thing that we provide is our entire library. From the very beginning, we provide you all of your implements. I'm not keeping any notebooks. I'm not keeping anything. I want you to have everything, because first and foremost, anything could happen to anybody at any time. And then secondly, we never want to be the reason someone's not progressing, because we want your progress to completely be based on your efforts. And that's how it should be. But everybody does things differently. But at least with us, we give everything up front. So what do you think are the benefits of this, Poroye, and what could be the downside that we've experienced? Because sometimes people can handle that independence and sometimes people cannot. Have you ever experienced anyone not being able to assimilate the pace that you're trying to put them on?
Yes, actually, it has happened, of course, because when we are getting into delving into something new, it's really natural as human beings for us to be excited. And I understand that aspect of it, when we start delving and feeling drawn to this beautiful belief system that is Ifa. We're excited. We're very excited, and we want to start running. We want to learn or get as much information, or we want to essentially do whatever it is we need to do to feel like we're a part of something. And I think that's natural. But at the same time, the most important part of this belief system is really patience and time, because this is all about patience and good character. And understanding that this is a process and we have to really, really crawl before we can walk, and we can learn how to walk before we definitely start running. And sometimes that there's a disconnect there where we want to just start running and we want to hit a goal, when really it's important for everyone to understand that this learning process is for the rest of our lives. We are going to be learning and studying Ifa as initiates for our whole life. And there's enough information that can last us several lifetimes of learning. So, with that being said, what I have found in my experience is that, that kind of excitement turns into impatience. And that's kind of where, miscommunications can occur, or negative outcomes. where, we just want to kind of do what we want to do, and we don't necessarily want to listen to what our elders are saying. And it's so important, to, if you've selected someone who you're looking forward to having as an elder, that you are going to trust that person, because you're going to be with them for the rest of your lives. That's the expectation. So take it slow. It's like most people wouldn't marry the person they met that first day, right? Some would. But, generally speaking, we want to get to know someone. We want to form a relationship and a bond, and then take things to the next level. I think it's the same thing. And I have the thing that I could say, Joseph, that I've experienced the most is people who are not necessarily patient in their journey. And, this leads to disobedience and misunderstandings where, you know, at the end of the day, if the best way to know if someone's going to be cut out for this is start inviting them to the aftermath of events, the things that they could participate in. Let's see if you can do that, because sometimes it's going to take 3 days of sleepless nights. It's going to take a lot of cleanup.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
going to take a lot of listening. It's going to take a lot of nothing, really, and nothing necessarily exciting. And sometimes we have that impression that, this is some kind of exciting, party event, or, social event is a better way to put it. And, we've seen that disconnect a lot where, even though you can be upfront, people will definitely choose to come to their own conclusions, and they have their right to do that.
Awesome response. And we had the episode on Espiritismo with Miss Addie. Such an epic interaction. Our regards to her. And I remember one of the things she said towards the end of the interview that I liked so much. It was a message to all those people getting involved in any of these faiths or spirituality. She said, be careful with disobedience. You don't know why your elders are telling you something, but it's the same reason why we don't always know why our parents are telling us something until we make the mistake and we're suffering the consequences. And then we go running to them to see how we can get that solution. Ifa is based on a preventative philosophy in medicine, and one of those preventions is obedience. Now that we've spoken about what is an elder obligated to do, I think the more interesting part is, what are they not obligated to do? Now, in the beginning, when you're entering into this elder position, it can be very exciting because it's like, wow, there's people that look up to me. There's people that depend on me. Apart from my family, apart from my significant other, I want to perform. I want to make sure that I'm fulfilling, right? Now, the big mistake that a lot of people can make is being friendly. Now, that's not to say that we can't be on amicable terms, but one thing that needs to be understood before entering into this position, or whether you're looking for somebody, is your godparent is not your friend. And this is one of the first conversations I have with gentlemen before I bring them into the fraternity of Ifa. We bring them into Orisha so that they're never confused. Because your friends are going to do the opposite of what your religious elders should do. So what does that mean? If you're in or participating in unproductive or, negative behavior, your friend might allow you to pursue that or continue with that. Your elder should not. But the only way you'd be able to accept that kind of criticism is if the person is not your friend. Because if we're friends, you really can't critique me because we're both doing the same thing. But if it's an elder initiate relationship, you have to take that advice. And if you don't feel like you could take that advice or take that advice from that person, you're with the wrong elder candidate, right? What else? Your elder does not have to pick up a phone call for you at 3 or 4 in the morning. And we're speaking from experience with this one, because unfortunately some people have these blurred lines of expectations of, I'm calling my madrina at 3 in the morning when something, maybe, spicy happens. Madrina has to sleep. She might have done a misa that day. She might have been working all day. And you have people that choose to go on their way because we didn't pick up that phone call, right? But these are not obligations of an elder to an initiate. If you have a medical emergency, without being coy whatsoever, please call 911. But after 8 or 9 p.m., your godparent does not need to be consulted on anything, because really at these late hours of the night, you shouldn't be practicing Ifa and Orisha unless you're absolutely sure about what you're doing. So there's really no reason because they're not your friend. It's like, would you call your grandmother at midnight? The poor thing, she's trying to rest, So it's the same concept, common courtesy and respect. Another thing, your godparent, and we touched on this briefly, is not obligated to do anything for free for you, right? Because their time is valuable. They may have clients. They have a family. And I'll ask you, Poroye, before I give my idea based on it, what have been your experiences when you've done free work for people?
Well, the charity really, it seems nice. You might think it feels nice, right? You're performing a charity and such. However, from my experience, it really, really, really is not productive.
Correct.
Because what we have found is that, people have spiritual debts. And what happens is, let's be clear up front, because you'll have those godparents that I think, I call it the hala,
The pole.
the hala, I'm not going to charge you for this. And, let me let you feel like we're doing a charity work for you. But then I'm going to, all of a sudden identify all these other things you have to do. Or for example, hey, I'm not going to charge you, to throw obi to your orishas. Just put whatever you want to my orisha, right? We want to be careful with those things because I think that there's still subconscious expectations that
There has to be.
we're not identifying up front, and that's what causes frustration and even spiritual debts that even your elders can create for you out there, guys, because they might say, hey, put whatever you want to shango, and you put $10, and when they pick up those $10, they're not, maybe in the back of their mind, maybe they feel disrespected. And they're just not telling you that because they didn't want to put a fee on you or, make you feel like you were being charged. But how unproductive was that negative energy, right? Wouldn't it be more productive just to be clear up front of what the expectation is and why? Why is it that this is what it is? So that there won't be that negative backlash behind the positive things that we're trying to accomplish.
Absolutely. And we've had so many experiences like that because so many people funnel through the botanica. So here's a couple different instances that we've seen with people. Oh, well, my godparents charged me this very discounted rate to initiate into Orisha. But once they had that large lump sum, out of nowhere, these hidden fees came out like a credit card. Oh, I need 1,000 for this. Oh, the drum is this much. Oh, this, that, and the third. And then the person's like, man, I didn't know that, but I've already given this person set amount of funds. I can't go back now. So that's what the hala really is, right? It's like, got you. I have other instances of people who have initiated in other traditions, right, that seem like they're much more discounted. Now, they go through their initiation, they have their license, newly initiated priest, but now that they've done that, what happens? Oh, mi hijado, I can't give you your libreta de ita until you do ebo. By the way, the ebo is set amount of lump sum. And you're like, man, I just spent all this money on Orisha. I need to start understanding my destiny, but this person's not giving me my book until I spend another lump sum. No amount of clarity or transparency before actually taking these huge steps and investments. Another example. Hey, you're a babalao now. Hey, you initiated into said tradition. Okay, I want to start learning. Well, the first module is set amount of thousands of dollars. Oh my God, you thought you were getting something at a discounted rate. You have the license, but it's like being a lawyer that's stuck as a legal aid because we haven't gotten board certified yet, and we didn't even know we needed a board certification. So many different instances and nuances, but it happens all the time. So what we're trying to say here to all of those that are picking godparents, possibly choosing a house to initiate further into, make sure you read the fine print, because this is like a credit card. I signed up, I'm excited, I have all this line of credit, and then out of nowhere the interest is this much if you don't pay within a certain amount of time. Same concept. So make sure everything is on the table, because one thing that people have to understand, and once again, for the person coming in, it's not your fault by any means, but you have to realize very quickly there is a business aspect to Ifa. Why is that? Ifa costs money, and the Odu of Eyobe It says everything in Ifa comes with a cost. The goat, the coconut, the bawalao's time, the cotton, everything costs money, right? So what does that mean? You cannot disregard the business savvy you have to have when picking a godparent, because at the end of the day, you are contracting a professional for a service. It's easy for that to get convoluted in emotion because of the elder aspect. Oh my God, you're my mother. I love you. I'll do whatever you need. Madrina, if you need me to fix your roof, I'll fix your roof. The AC, I'll drive you around all day. But then when Madrina says, hey, by the way, it's this amount to do Orisha, you can't get mad at that point because business is business. At the end of the day, Mijado, I appreciate all that you've done. I've done what I can do for you on a barter, instance, but we still have to pay for that goat to be able to crown and get through all these processes. So please be aware of these things so that when you get to that point, you haven't overinvested your time in something that's not going to bear the fruit that you're looking for, because expectations are everything and they could lead to disappointment. So it's better to speak clearly, have the uncomfortable conversations from the beginning so that we don't have uncomfortable moments later, right? We talked about the spiritual debts. Nothing works without an investment of some sort. Giving or getting things for free isn't productive, right? Because of the debts that you mentioned. Everything comes with a cost, whether it's a service, whether it's actual funds, it all takes it, right? And another thing that's really important, I'm not sure if you touched on this, prices are set by the elder. Have we touched on that?
No, we haven't.
Okay, so this is a perfect moment. Prices are set by the elder, right? Some people want to be initiated with certain people because of the status that they have within the community. And that's perfectly fine. Some people like to go to Harvard for a degree, or some people like to hang out at said location because it'll help them interact with a certain demographic of clientele. All of this is perfectly fine because, once again, Ifa and Orisha have a business aspect to them. But here's the thing. If you want to receive said service from said professional who has thousands of views on YouTube, who has thousands of followers on Facebook, who's spoken about, on all these different mediums and whatnot, because you want to be associated with quality, quality comes with a cost. So what does that mean? Let's say you go to them, hey, Baba, I want you to give me Orisha J. Okay, my friend, Orisha J costs this much. Oh, Baba, that's too much. Oh, I spoke to said Bawalao and he said he'd give it to me for this much. That's perfectly fine, but said Bawalawo doesn't have the brand behind them, doesn't have an establishment that they have to maintain. So everybody's lifestyle is different. Who's wrong, who's right? Absolutely no one. At the end of the day, the person has the right to set their price based on their brand and based on their lifestyle. If someone can provide you the same quality for a margin of the cost, business-wise, you should do it with them. But then you have to think, what was sacrificed in the difference of thousands of dollars? That's when the business aspect comes in and says, something has to be missing here. Because let's say it's a $500 difference. Hey, 500 out of set amount of thousands might not be that much of a difference. But if we're talking about a 50, 60% discount, a goat might have been missing. A babalao might have been missing. An herb might have been much more than an herb might have been missing. And this is what we really have to take into account, because it's very easy to get lost in the numbers because we're in a very saturated market. So make sure, once again, everything is about expectations and goals. What kind of house do you want to be with? What kind of professional do you want to be attended to by? And then at that point, understand what that is going to cost. Because if said person has thousands of, people clamoring to interact with them, to be able to actually designate their time and set it aside just for you, that's going to come with a premium. So it's very important. Now, very, very important to know. Poroye, do you feel like this is coherent? Do you feel like people have the right to set their own prices?
Absolutely. We have to. I mean, there's a basis behind what the cost is going to be. And really, if you're within the correct household and with the correct elders, I mean, there really shouldn't be this huge secret as far as what's going to be incorporated. Because if the idea is that I'm going to be teaching you, one day you possibly have a goal of having your own spiritual house, then essentially you're going to need to know where those costs went, right? So there really is no secret. I think what we're really talking about is derecho, which is
Correct.
specifically what the godparent is going to make off of it. And that's the big elephant in the room always, right? Because everybody wants to act like they're not getting a derecho. And, I knew a santero, Joseph. I don't think I ever told you this, but this gentleman waited 40 years to get his list to be able to, because he had people who wanted to crown with him.
Wow.
It took him 40 years for his godparents to give him a list of what he was going to need to incorporate into that ceremony.
Old school. Oh my God.
And it's so this is why all of these price tags and all this top secret information that, really is it? There shouldn't be any secret that the godparents are going to get a earnings off of a ceremony, because when you really think about it, it's only right if it's being done correctly. There is a lot of time and
Months.
efforts. We're talking about months of preparation that is going to go into this. And that has to be set based on the person, because, for example, if I'm going to be dedicating myself to crowning an Orisha, well, I have other things going on. And, for example, I have a family, I have a husband, I have a business, I work real estate, for example. So that means I'm coming off my real estate business for 3 months planning your ceremony. That's great. I'll do it, if that's what Oshun saw fit, and if that's the appropriate steps that we need to take together, then I also need to consider all of these things, because at the end of the day, I can't be at a loss. And that is just a technicality behind what it is, and it really shouldn't be a secret, because, this is what it is. We're working for you. We're working to initiate you, to teach you, and to do things the correct way. But that takes a lot of time. And I think that people need to be a little bit considerate about that, and understand that that preparation and that timing, it costs. It costs money, and it shouldn't be a secret. Because when there's secrecy, then there's always that, it's very dishonest sometimes when we try to sugarcoat or when we try to hide fees. Let's just be honest. Sometimes people don't appreciate the honesty and they don't like it. But, a lot of people, you would think, should appreciate it, because at the end of the day, everything needs to be transparent in this. And I do believe that. And that's the way we run our house. We're very transparent.
An awesome response. And I love that you brought up one thing, the elephant in the room, because there really is no secret. First and foremost, there's so much information on the internet. I mean, anybody could price a goat at their local, I don't know, farm. But we price things in a way where the day after tomorrow, because a lot of our god kids take off very quickly. Like, hey, Madrina, I have this going on. I want this. I want to give this person falokun. Like, we get the lists, expenses, that confirmation that we spoke of earlier. If you charge the person justly and adequately, you have no reason to withhold the information that they're going to get anyway. So it's not a secret, because an old saying says you're a godchild today and a godparent tomorrow. So you have to expect, as soon as the person takes those steps, they might have initiations ready to go. And you have to be there to fulfill as the elder, as long as there were no intentions and there wasn't anything done unethically. But the problem is, nowadays, a lot of people are setting false expectations, or they're not charging justly based on whatever criteria that they may have, or the misdirection that they've provided. And what does this lead to? What we're trying to avoid: separation. So charge justly for your time. Let people understand and, know the expectations that come with your time. And then you won't have to withhold anything. And that's why from the very beginning, we give everybody the list. There's times when I've even sat down and done the list with people. This is how much I'm making off of your ceremony. Do you feel comfortable with this before you even take that step? Because once again, this is business. There's no reason to get emotional. But with Ifa and Orisha, when someone is being misguided, it's easy to get convoluted, and, it destroys a relationship. I think another great thing to get into now is what is expected of the godchild now, right? One thing is, we really have to understand that when we enter into a godchild position, or scenario, things are not equal. What is expected of me might not necessarily be what I can expect from my elder. So, what does that mean? A godchild is expected, unless something completely unethical has occurred, to call their godparents or visit their godparents on the godparents' date or festival of Ifa or Orisha. It is an obligation because that is where you were born from, right? Now, what is not the obligation of the godparent? Your godparent does not have to call or visit you on your date of initiation. And some people are really taken aback and appalled by this. It's not that it wouldn't be nice. It's not that it wouldn't be a kind gesture, but we're speaking about obligations here. And if we look at the Odu of Eyobe, it says respect our elders, right? And when we look at the term elder, we can't just take into account years. We have to take into account age. And what does that mean? My godparent may have 1,000 godchildren. She can't visit every one of us. She might be 80 years old. Maybe Madrina's one of these lawas and she's 75. She doesn't even know how to work a smartphone. But you might get mad at Madrina because she didn't call you on your birthday. She might not remember. She might not know how to use a phone. It could be any of these things. This is why the godparent cannot be held to the same criteria or expectations as the godchild. You know better, you do better. And it is expected of the godchild to fulfill this obligation, right? Another thing is that it is expected, unless the godchild has such or created their own establishment to a certain degree, for them to be present for their elders' ceremonies. Let's say Madrina has a santo. I really don't have anything going on. You should be there, right? Support, all of these different things. Ideally, there will be compensation. That's not always the case, especially in the beginning when you're learning. I remember when I would go to my godfather's plantes and things like that, I was very blessed because he compensated me, but he really saw that I was studying and really moving forward. But even with all of my acumen, he didn't have an obligation to pay me because this is apprenticeship. The same way when the samurais would go and learn from their elders, or the guys who were learning kung fu, or the carpenter, you are learning, right? You are honing your craft. And the day you're able to expect compensation, it's probably because it's time for you to open your own business and you're still not going to get $1 out of me. But every now and again, you have elders who have a certain movement, a certain fluidity, and they're able to provide that, and attending the study sessions. If you're lucky enough to where your elder actually provides like an escuelita or a school, you should be there, right? Not only if you already know everything, it doesn't mean you don't have to be there. You might be able to help educate the rest of the religious house, because we're only going to be as strong as the weakest link that's present. So you have that obligation as well, at least as long as it doesn't completely impede upon your schedule, to give back, right? Especially if you're someone who's been able to achieve a certain level of success within Ifa and Orisha practice. And Poroye, already knowing the answer to this, I want you to have the opportunity to express it, because you really live this. What is your experience like with your godmother? Or what is that relationship like, even after 10 years and even after you having your own religious house now?
Listen, I always say this. I chose my godmother and I chose her for forever. And there is not anything that could possibly happen or be said, or any misunderstanding or miscommunication that's going to cause a separation on my side. I'm always going to look for my godmother. I am always going to pay homage to my godmother. I am forever in debt to her and to Yamaya. Um, and it shocks me when I see the separation, because nothing should separate the godparent from the godchild other than distance or death. That is what the expectation should be. And for me, my relationship, I will always look for her. And the only thing that separates us right now is distance. But she's always there for me when I have any kind of question. And I always make sure that I go to her and go to Yamaya when I need to, pay homage on her on her cumpleaños santo and all these things, I always make sure that I am doing what I need to do. And once again, there is nothing that can be said. There's no amount of gossip. There's no amount of misunderstandings or miscommunication that will ever separate me from my godmother, because I chose her and I chose her forever. And that's my opinion, and that's how seriously I take this.
And I can attest to that because every time we try to call her, she's in Europe somewhere, right? She's at some cathedral or in front of some mosaic. She's living her best
As she
life.
should be.
As she should be.
Yes.
That lady, how many did she crown? Like over 50, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that sopera, the poor thing, right? It was either getting cleaned or getting fed. But definitely can attest to that. I mean, you being someone so involved in the Orisha practice, an aspect of things, do you see people trying to or not trying to fulfill those Hijado roles? And why do you think they are or not doing so?
I think that it happens all the time, where, possibly the hijado maybe doesn't really understand what the expectation is, or they choose not to follow it. All of those things have serious consequences, because we have to look at the bigger picture here. We have to understand and realize that not only are you dealing with individuals, you're dealing with a whole belief system and all the orishas and everything that comes with that, all the spiritual dead and everything else that comes with that. So I mean, I've seen it a lot where the hijado, the godchild, may due to any kind of miscommunication, just feel like they want to hop around. And some of you guys out there, I really feel for you, because I know that there's a lot of people out there that are looking for something, and they're unfortunately not finding it, because there's a lot of imbalance within our culture right now. But at the same time, I challenge you to really identify what is the cause of all this hopping around. Because what I found is I've probably had the worst experience with adopted godchildren. You know, I'm sorry to say, but it's just really true. Is I feel like maybe they are not necessarily in touch with what they need versus what they want. And I think that that's something that I've also have learned to analyze. What is it that we're looking for here? Because in answer to your question, Joseph, as far as Ijados really not understanding, um, godchildren understanding, where they fit in and what they need to be doing and what they don't need to be doing. It's not necessarily that they're not being taught this. It's just because they're not assimilating it. They're deciding not to follow. And so, that there we go there. That's a disconnect right there, Joseph, especially when we have the hoppers, I call them, people who come from all kinds of different spiritual houses, and they have the worst things to say about where they came from. And then the next thing they're disappearing on you too.
Oh yeah.
And it kind of makes you think, hey, maybe the problem is not, it might be within them. So I think people need to look into themselves as well, because we're imperfect beings. Sometimes the expectations we have on our elders is not realistic. And that might be the biggest issue that I've seen.
Well, that's why we're so big on ethics, especially in our organization, because we have come to realize when someone comes in, right, when we're giving them the opportunity to not be displaced spiritually, you know, it's a huge, how do I put this? It's a huge blessing for them. Not because it's with us necessarily, but just knowing how Ifa and Orisha originated, whether it was in Cuba or in Africa, there was no such thing as adoption. Like I know Bawalaos, like older Bawalaos, and actually I know very close Bawalaos that went through this occurrence where they left said religious house and they initiated somewhere else. And then one day they were interacting, trying to get more information or, reassimilate the house that they were going to before they left and initiated somewhere else. And when the elder heard about it, he said, no, 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 you have to go back. You left. So it's nothing personal, but now you have to resolve things over there. And a big reason was, even though it wasn't always expressed, was we're trying to avoid religious warfare here. Because when someone actually assimilates you as an adopted, member of their house, they're defending you. And that's why you really have to err on the side of caution when assimilating displaced people into your ile, really, because you don't know exactly what happened over there. And the reason I'm making a point to touch on this is because in our organization, when people come and they're bad mouthing where they came from or who their elders are, we don't accept them. So that's to be understood immediately. If someone comes in and starts speaking negatively about their godparent, unless it's something very heinous, we don't tolerate it. And even if it is heinous, there's no reason to speak negatively or aggressively. It's a mention at best. But you can't really take things like that into account, because we've had instances where people have left and they didn't realize the people they were trying to integrate into are actually associated with us, even if it is loosely. We're on very cordial terms, and they'll be like, hey, just wanted you to know said person said this and this about you guys. And we know it's not true, but we just want to let you know that this person is speaking, incoherencies about you. I appreciate the information. It really doesn't affect us because, once again, our brand is so thorough at this point. But it is nice to know that some people don't appreciate anything, right? Because we've literally had people come and be like, hey, this person tried to get with us, and we told them that we actually interact with you for most of our needs and resources. So it is a very small community. So it's like you mentioned, the house hoppers, and we're going to get into them before we close out the interview and the conversation. It is not a good method here, because you have to identify what is it that you're looking for. And is it the house's fault, or is it that own space that you're trying to fill somewhere else other than yourself? Because if you don't know what you're looking for, you'll never find it. And you're never going to find anything outside of yourself that has to do with you. We have to introspect first before we start looking for other things elsewhere. Because if not, you're just going to be searching. And, with every time you change, there's a lack of prestige that comes with that. There's when Benedict Arnold betrayed George Washington, the British accepted him, but they never trusted him because it's like, you're a traitor, and Ifa is very tribal. And I don't like to use words like that, but it is ultimately a tribal context. It's like, well, you left. Why did you leave? Was that coherent? Was it not? All of those things are going to be inspected as you start selecting a house or a new house, because somehow or another, we're all associated or have mingled, right? So having touched on that, I guess we can get into a couple personal experiences of, why people left or why people came as well, right? But a personal experience here, and I'm the type of padrino because I kind of handle my religious house the way I was raised. So may she rest in peace, my grandmother, Aurora Fernandez, one of the best examples of a woman I've ever met besides my wife and my mother, my daughters ultimately. She was a woman of very few words, right? So what does that mean? I tell you something once, right? If you caught it, that's great. If you did not, you're going to learn another way, and then you're going to come back and confirm what I told you, because that's what experience is called. So I'm the same way. I might not be as harsh as she was, because, she was born in the 30s. It's a very different culture. But for the most part, I'm really not into repeating things or going over things over and over again, because we're all about progress here and achievement. So we had someone that was integrating into our spiritual home, and she was having issues with the father of her children, right? Very touchy subject. I remember when I got initiated into Ifa, my godfather told me, I will not get involved in your personal life because it's called personal for a reason. If you have an Ifa issue, please come to me. If you need personal advice, I'll provide it, but in the most political format possible, because I do not want to get dragged into anything that has to do with your relationships or your personal life. That is not my scope. So this woman, she had this thing where she went through some very intense situations with the father of her children. At least that's what she was telling us, because we've heard very different things from other people and third party sources, what have you. So after having a very definitive conversation about what she should do, and that there was really nothing else to discuss before that next decision, the next time when she was trying to call and talk about the same situation, I was unable to actually pick up the phone at the moment, being that I was actually in ceremony, right? When I tried to call back, I got no call, or I got no response. And before I knew it, I had heard that she had joined another house altogether. I said, wow, free ebos. cleanings, help, all of these different things, trying to get said person, said godchild, to an elevated state to be able to overcome said trauma from, said partner. And then as soon as we weren't able to pick up the phone one time, completely abandoned us.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
It's like the saying that escalated quickly, right?
oh God,
But and just to go back into maybe that story, another thing that's can be very insulting, not to us per se, but more to the orishas. When we're not following advice, whether we're elders or godchildren, really, we can't be shocked by the negative outcomes that are going to occur. For example, this individual apparently got into an altercation with someone, calls us at 4 in the morning and says, you know what, none of this stuff is working for
not
me.
just any someone that was going through their year in white. They popped off on a yawo out of nowhere.
So, and the response was not to take responsibility. Hey, I made a mistake. I probably shouldn't have, lifted my hands to someone, especially someone that's in their year in white, right? 'Cause there's a lot of spiritual backlash that's going to come with that. Instead of taking that accountability, right? It's so easy to say, hey guys, the things you're doing for me is not working. And those are the things we want to be careful of, is that little blame game, and that lack there of accountability. Because that really can end very negatively for us and for you.
Absolutely. I mean, not to, get into too many scenarios, because after all the time that we've been in this, you really go through everything. I think another couple key points about, people that have, decided to go their own route, based on their own criteria, whether it was they were looking for more of a fraternal aspect of things where, when you have godparents that are actually, progressive and have a life outside of Ifa and Orisha, because some people might get confused. Well, Joseph, you say Ifa is your life. It really is. It's my career. It's my passion. It's basically my everything. But even outside of this, I have a wife. I have my children, who are the only thing that I hold above Ifa is my family, because Oromila says you have to. In the Oduo Salafobeo, Oromila chose his family over Ifa. So there has to be a divide and a balance, because too much Ifa, you won't have a family. So now, mind you, when you have people like this who understand that family is the most important thing we have, we might not have a tambol every week. We might not have a misa every week. We might not be having a general Ifa divination for the house on a weekly basis. What does that mean? On the down weeks, it's time to study. It's time to regroup on a personal level. Even though Ifa is a very communal thing, it is also very personal. So when your godparents are not having a function, it's not that we're looking for something to do on Saturday night. It's that, hey, how can I prepare myself to be a a support system or a focal point to a certain degree in the next ceremony? How can I provide value? How can I provide support? How can I help my elders and my brothers and sisters accomplish this goal? That's what we need to be putting all of that desire into. Not, let's look on Facebook and find when the next Guido is, or let's just find a random misa to fall into, because that can be dangerous in itself, because every time you interact in one of these functions flimsically, you have a real chance of picking something up, because when you're at this stage of growth and initiation, you guys are like sponges. And even us, people that have been like, I have a very good friend who just doesn't go to tambores, and he loves them. He thinks the music is fabulous and whatnot, but he's been able to recognize his spiritual DNA is not compatible with just the random, tambor. So I ask you, Poroye, what were you doing when there wasn't a tambor? What were you doing when there wasn't a misa, being that your godmother was one of those women that really had that kind of fluidity in work? What were you dedicating your time to?
I learned, I had the blessing of learning through my elders, specifically my godmother, Omiyale, that, that this is, I think every time that we really focus on things like partying and gathering together and social events, I think that we are getting further from the actuality or the reality of what this is. And Ifa and Orisha, this spirituality is a very individual journey. So I think we can get distracted very easily with all of the glitter and the supposed good times. We think we're having so much fun, when in reality we're just really distracting ourselves from facing ourselves. And my godmother is a very serious woman.
Oh, yes.
She, although she has the name that she has within the religious community, she taught us early on that those are not the circles that we want to be in. And I completely understand that now. I was never interested in being in it in the first place, because the thing is that once you're comfortable with who you are as an individual, you don't have to lean on other people. You don't have to feel like you're a part of something in that way. You realize that, your journey is yours. And it can be a very lonely journey. It is a very lonely journey at the end of the day, because it's individual spiritual growth. And that's, I think we give the wrong impression when every other week we're having a party, because this is not a party, really. This is about a lot of study. This is a lot of dedication, and this is very serious. This is not a joke.
Because it can take away from the religious aspect of things. I
Exactly.
mean, everybody has the right to organize their functions, however, but we can't completely veer off so much from Orisha that it is unrecognizable as an initiation or a ceremony within our culture. And we see that a lot because people just aren't interested they're not excited by Ifa no more, it seems.
Well, it's not, they're not, people are not, in general, are not going to be excited about studying 4 hours every night. Because that's what Ifa is really in
Oh,
Orisha.
yeah.
You need to study. You need to study for yourself, for your own well-being, and to be able to maximize the growth of, what you're gaining from this. And it's not to say anything is wrong with going to a tambor, but, it's about keeping everything in perspective. And I think as an elder, we have to set the tone. It's not somebody who's coming into this. It's really, you guys, a lot of times it's not your fault. If you're misguided or misled, or, those misconceptions, are given to you early on, it's not your fault. But it is your job to educate yourselves. And the best advice that I can give is make educated decisions. What's the saying? All that is glitter
Isn't gold. All the glitters
isn't
isn't gold.
gold. It might seem nice, but understand what it really takes, and educate yourself before getting into this, because I cannot stress enough, this is very serious, and it's a beautiful thing, but it's something that is going to require a lot of dedication, and it's a lifestyle.
Absolutely. And just a couple different odus that I want to get into before we bring this interaction full circle. I mean, we touched on how in the Odu Eyobe, it speaks of the importance of respecting our elders, right? And it's ironic because Eyobe at one point was the smallest Odu, and then by way of him performing sacrifice with the head, he became the head Odu. So it's ironic, technically Eyobe was the youngest sign, and it says respect your elders even though he became the elder. From another standpoint, because, the initiate is deserving of respect as well, the Odu Ofun Meji says why we have to respect our children, whether it's our godchildren, biological, etc., right? Because Ofun Meji at one point was the head Odu, and he ended up being the 16th Meji. And, when we look at how necessary these two positions are, because there is no padrino without an hijado, or no hijado without a padrino, right? So just chalking it up to the elders, the Odu Oyekun Meji says without elders, there's chaos, right? In the Odu Odiyekun, it speaks of when Oromila had gray hair and people wanted to basically eliminate him, but they realized that one day they would be elders. So they had to treat their elders a certain way so they could really bring that good karma back, right? And, you look at the Odu Obaraobe, it says, oreja no pasa cabeza, right? At the end of the day, an ear will never go above the head, at least while it's attached, right? So we have to understand when we're in this role of Godchild, we will never be our elder's elder. No matter how many more initiations we do than them, no matter how much more popular or notable we are than them, you are always your godparent's godchild. And it's very important to check that ego at the door, because at the end of the day, someone is always above you and someone is always coming up right under you. So, But when we're talking about the respect that's due to hijados, because we're not trying to beat anybody up here. You have to know your value as well. You look at the odu like irosoate, right? When the hijado was abandoned and it caused him to completely fall into despair, it goes back to our original theme of you need to select well, because irosoate got initiated with a gentleman that was very high volume and always traveling. And when he got initiated trying to be a part of that crowd, he was completely abandoned because his godfather or Yubona didn't have time to teach him. And the Oduiro Sofun was where Obatala stole the money to be able to crown somebody santo. So he got the derecho, completely squandered the money, and he ultimately got punished for doing that because there's no more unethical action. Odu's like Oturate Yu, Irete Suga, Osarete, where it says the youngest divines, right? Where it says that we have to take everybody into account when it comes into this conversation. But the pataki that I really want to say before we kind of ask these last questions to ourselves is the one from Irete and Telu. In Irete Obe was where Orumila had a godchild that he initiated, and ironically, he came with the same sign of Irete and Telu. Now, this young man, he advanced very quickly. He learned ebo, he learned how to direct. He was a prodigy, Ifa says. But he lost humility. He lost that awe that he had of his elder. And because of it, it caused him to interact in a disrespectful fashion. Because when a gentleman initiates you into Ifa, you're supposed to kneel in front of him every time you see him, right? And it is not the godfather's responsibility to ask for that courtesy. It's understood by way of initiation. So Rumila noticed multiple times that his godson would kneel in front of him. So, one day, he asked his godson, he said, do you have something wrong with your knee? In a very political, very inquisitive fashion, but never disrespectfully. To the point where his godson lost patience and said, no, I'm just not kneeling in front of you because I don't feel I should kneel in front of anybody I know more than. And Orumila felt greatly disrespected by this and, choosing to retire rather than engage in, his godson's immature and frankly, ugly behavior, the godson actually slapped him, right? And struck his godfather. Orumila didn't respond. He didn't raise his hands back. He simply retired from, where they were. As time went on, the godson started going through horrible situations, phenomenons. Everything that can go wrong was going wrong, to the point where he consulted himself. Iretentelu was revealed, where he said the only thing he had to do was, show humility in front of his Oluo. He went looking for him, and he went to his house and found that it was empty. But when he looked at the sky, he saw Orula. And he said, I came to apologize. I'd like to interact with you again. And Orula said, you had my forgiveness from the moment you smacked me, but I can never give you the opportunity to hurt me again. So unfortunately, now we must separate. And what Orumila left behind was the icon that all initiates know. So why am I saying this? As we're getting into elders, guides, godparents, etc., when you make a decision like that of war, of aggression, of violence towards the person that has given you a destiny, that has given you spiritual liberty, you have to understand when you make that decision, it's forever. And Orumila wanted to accept his godson back because he adored him. And I know there's godparents out there, and even godchildren, I'm sure, that look at, their elders or minors, etc., and they're like, man, I'd really love to have that person back in my life because we had good moments. But there's certain things we just can't come back from. And one of those was that, right? Apart from any, other serious situations that can occur, because there's never an excuse for disrespect. And that really brings me to this, fulfilling question for you, Poroye. How much should we be avoiding separation? We're talking about godparent, godchild. How important is it to find a way to make it work?
By any means necessary. That's how important it is. And this
I
is
agree.
why we shouldn't rush through our process. This is why patience is really key here, because you want to be making the right decision, because it is forever and it should be forever. Communication has to always be there. And I think that Joseph, a lot of times, really kind of what comes in between that is other people. That's why I don't. The best advice I can give out there: don't follow the crowds. Don't be sheep,
No,
because those are the ones that will be in your ear, separating you from your godparents, and that can be a detrimental decision
misery loves
that
company.
you can never go back from. So, by any means necessary, I always say this: communicating, we can solve anything. We can solve any misunderstanding through educated conversation. We can understand each other and we can come to a resolution. And separation is just never an option. It shouldn't be.
What a conversation, right? I think we provided so much value. And guys, just know that whether it's with us or without us, we're here to provide clarity. We want you to make the best decision based on your goals, based on what you want your Ifa and Orisha career to be. So even if it's not with us, that clarity can be provided so you can select the best people, because even if you might not make a great godchild in our house, you may make a great associate one day, because we're the kind of house I think the next Orisha ceremony we're doing, only like out of the 8 or 9 santeros that are there, only 2 or 3 are actually from our house. Everybody else is from other lineages, and we work harmoniously. Not everybody's meant to fulfill that role to everybody. But Poroye, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. A couple things I'd like to go over before we disconnect. If you like this hat or you like this shirt, you'll be able to purchase it by way of the link that's in the descriptions, where Our Roots gear can be, purchased, whether it's the Orisha drip line or this. Botanicacandlesandmore.com is up and running. If you want to be a part of Ifa classes, consultations, or Poroye's spiritual mentorship program, all of that is available. Poroye, did you want to mention anything before I go into the close?
This was a wonderful conversation that I think needed to be had. I hope that everyone out there got something from it. And, it's been a real pleasure talking about this, because I see a lot of people with so many questions about this. And I really hope we've answered all your questions. If there's anything else that maybe we didn't touch on that you guys want to hear about, please let us know so that we can be able to extend upon this topic.
Guys, thank you so much for tuning into Our Roots podcast with Joseph Babaifa. Where only the strongest roots see the light, brought to you by Botanica Candles and More. If you haven't had the opportunity, hit that subscribe button, share this video, like it, comment what you thought, and until next time, see the light.